The group gathered at the dock, a mix of excitement and a slight hint of nervous anticipation in the air. Harry, a successful businessman, proudly displayed his boat, a sleek, powerful vessel aptly named the Victor. With a smile, he welcomed each guest aboard, gesturing towards the boat as if it were his personal floating palace. Laura, a young student with high hopes for the trip, nodded shyly and joined Emma and Bill, a warm, friendly couple who seemed at ease. Max, a seasoned sailor with a tanned face and a serious expression, silently scanned the sky, his eyes lingering on the heavy clouds gathering on the horizon. He leaned over to Harry and quietly murmured, "The storm might be stronger than predicted. Maybe we should delay." But Harry just waved him off with a grin, patting the sailor's shoulder. "Don't worry, Max. We'll be fine. Everyone's here for an adventure, right?" His voice was confident, yet Max's expression remained tense. With each gust of wind and each passing minute, as the sky grew darker, Max felt a sense of unease he couldn't put into words. The boat set off, and at first, everything was smooth. The vessel glided over the waves, and the passengers laughed, taking in the sights. Laura snapped photos, Bill and Emma held hands, savoring the moment, while Harry proudly shared tales of his boat's previous journeys. Max, standing by the helm, kept his eyes fixed on the sea, listening to the water and the increasing wind. After a few hours, it seemed the storm he feared might not come after all, and Max briefly relaxed, thinking perhaps he'd been overly cautious. But suddenly, the sky darkened dramatically. The wind surged with unexpected force, and waves began to rise, crashing over the sides. The wind whipped fiercely, and Laura clung to a nearby rail, her face stricken with fear. "Max, are you sure we'll make it?" she shouted, her voice nearly drowned by the roar of the waves. Max gritted his teeth, gripping the wheel tightly, trying to steady the boat. He turned to Harry, shouting, "I warned you. Now we're out here with no quick way back." A massive wave struck the boat, lifting the bow and tilting it dangerously. Everyone lost their balance. Bill tried to hold on to Emma, who screamed in terror as they were nearly thrown overboard. Harry, who had been laughing confidently just minutes earlier, now clung desperately to the side, trying to stay on board. Max yelled over the deafening storm, "Hold on to anything you can. This is going to be rough." But it was too late. The next wave, as if angry, crashed into them with such force that the boat flipped, throwing everyone into the freezing water. Laura was pulled under, feeling the ocean closing around her. She struggled to the surface, her legs caught on a rope from the boat, thrashing to free herself. Finally, she broke free and gasped for air, coughing up salt water. Max, though bruised, managed to keep afloat and searched for the others. He saw Harry clutching a piece of debris nearby, trying to hold on. Emma swam frantically, looking for Bill, who had been beside her just moments before. They struggled, the waves tossing them, until they all spotted the shore in the distance. Their only hope, gathering every ounce of strength, they began swimming, each muscle straining against the current pulling them back into open water. Max led the way, forcing himself not to look back, focusing only on reaching the shore. After what felt like an eternity, they finally made it to the beach. Exhausted, they collapsed on the sand, gazing up at the now calm, clear sky, as if the storm had never happened. Laura gasped for breath, trying to steady herself, and looked over at Max. Where are we?" Max scanned the unfamiliar landscape. Sandy beach, palm trees, and no sign of civilization. They were on an island, wild and remote, with no visible signs of rescue. Harry, still on his knees, wiped his face and looked around nervously. "We made it. But how are we supposed to get out of here?" Max looked at each of them seriously. "No one knows where we are, Harry. Be thankful we're alive. Our first priority is finding fresh water and food." His tone was firm, but worry flickered in his eyes. They all understood that any hope of quick rescue had vanished. Survival was now their only focus. They began walking along the shore, searching for a safe place to set up camp. Max took the lead, his silence reinforcing his determination. Laura followed closely, looking around with growing unease. Emma appeared calm on the outside, but her constant glances behind revealed her anxiety. Bill was close by, holding her hand firmly. After finding a spot that seemed relatively safe, Max instructed, "We'll make camp here, stick together, and no one wanders off alone. If we want to be found, we have to survive first." He didn't elaborate, but everyone understood. They were isolated, cut off from the world. Hours of hard work later, they managed to build a makeshift camp with a few primitive shelters from gathered leaves and bamboo. It was far from perfect, but it was all they had. Max gathered everyone around a small fire they'd managed to start with scraps salvaged from the boat. They sat in a circle, feeling the darkness closing in and listening to the eerie sounds of the island's night, each noise adding to their sense of dread. In the morning, when everyone woke up, Bill was nowhere to be found. Emma, realizing her husband was missing, looked around in panic and frantically asked if anyone had seen him. Her hands trembled, and her voice edged toward hysteria. Max, trying to stay calm and keep the group together, replied, "Maybe he just went to look for food. Let's stay put and stick together. Let's wait. He might be back soon." He tried to reassure Emma and the others, but the tension in the air only grew, and an unsettling sense of danger loomed over them. The day began with a tense search. Max, feeling the weight of responsibility for the team, decided to venture deeper into the island. He hoped to find some trace of Bill, as he was the most experienced among them. His heart was pounding, but his determination to understand what had happened drove him forward. Laura and Harry stayed back at the camp, trying to calm Emma, who was on the verge of a breakdown. She kept glancing at the path, as if expecting her husband to return at any moment. Dark thoughts crept into her mind. What if he wasn't coming back? Hours of searching yielded nothing. The island remained as mysterious and deserted as before. But suddenly, Max spotted something odd. In the thick underbrush, he found footprints. They were uneven and barefoot, larger and wider than usual. Each print was deeply pressed into the ground, as if left by something heavy. Max braced himself for the worst, his heartbeat quickening as he realized there could be others here. Stepping out from the dense foliage, Max came across primitive shelters, branches tied together to form some kind of cover. A sense of being watched washed over him. He took a shaky breath, crouching down to examine the footprints more closely. "Whoever's here, they know we're here too," he murmured, feeling a cold sweat trickle down his back. Meanwhile, back at camp, Laura, worried about Bill and Max, decided to do a bit of her own scouting, though she knew it was risky. During her short trek into the woods, she stumbled upon the remnants of a campfire that seemed recently used. But that wasn't all. Around it lay scattered bones, yellowed and haphazardly arranged. Some even showed signs of charring, hinting at a grim fate for whoever they once were. Laura felt a chill in her stomach as she realized these bones could very well have belonged to people. Rushing back to camp, she said, "Someone's watching us," her voice trembling, her face pale but filled with conviction. Harry, hearing her story, just shook his head, dismissing it as paranoia. "We're scaring ourselves," he tried to reassure Emma, but the uncertainty in his voice only heightened her fear. That night, the camp was engulfed in darkness, and every sound seemed louder. The shadows cast by the fire flickered against the trees, like ghostly figures toying with their minds. Laura couldn't sleep. Something gnawed at her. Deep down, she sensed the shadows weren't just tricks of the light. Suddenly, as she listened to the silence of the night, she noticed movement. Shadows appeared again among the trees, edging closer to the camp. She shivered, quickly getting up and trying to wake the others. But when they scrambled out of their sleeping bags, the night remained still. Only their belongings lay scattered across the ground, as if after a struggle. Bare footprints marked the grass, along with a dark stain that looked disturbingly like blood. But the most terrifying part? Emma was gone. She'd vanished just like Bill, but now the tracks led deeper into the forest. Panic seized the camp. Harry, his confidence shattered, looked at Max with suspicion, almost as if searching for someone to blame for the unfolding nightmare. Laura kept her distance, feeling that the situation was growing increasingly dangerous for everyone. They were outnumbered now, and doubts began to fester in their minds. "You know something," Harry accused, directing his frustration at Max. Laura insisted there was someone else on the island, but her words only added to the tension. Now, every step into the darkness felt like a step toward danger, and every sound sent chills down their spines. The night enveloped them, like an ever-looming shadow, as they realized that their own paranoia could be the death of them. Harry and Max ventured deep into the forest, knowing they needed food, but their hearts pounded with unease. They pushed through thick underbrush, dodging dead branches that seemed to reach out like hands, trying to grab them. The air grew heavy and stifling, filled with invisible threats. The first signs of danger appeared abruptly. A snap in the bushes, and then shadowy figures emerged, locals, dressed in rough animal skins with unsettlingly large, fiery eyes. They carried spears made from bones, and their faces were hidden behind masks of human skin that seemed to whisper horrors of an unknown past. The forest itself fell silent, as if watching the clash that was about to unfold. When the locals advanced, time seemed to freeze, and terror gripped Harry and Max. One of the figures, with a twisted expression and a wild scream, lunged at them. The spear struck the ground just as Harry managed to leap aside. Cold fear seized him, but adrenaline pushed him into action. Max shouted, trying to distract the attackers, but in the next instant, one of them grabbed his shoulder, driving a spear into his side. "Run!" Max shouted, feeling as though time slowed as he was thrown to the ground. His heart pounded wildly as the enemy raised the spear again. Harry, worried for his friend, grabbed a rock, adrenaline fueling his every move. He aimed at one of the attackers a few yards away, throwing it with all his might. The stone shattered a mask, and a collective hiss rose as if the whole group reacted to the broken mask. A trap that had been sprung. "Go!" Harry yelled, feeling a chilling fear seep into his thoughts. They started running, but the menacing gazes of their pursuers followed. Fleeing through the forest, they missed old, forgotten crosses jutting up from beneath the leaves, along with ominous signs left by past victims. In the midst of chaos, Laura, who had fallen behind, suddenly froze, clutching her chest as she noticed rusty fishing gear alongside unnatural tracks leading into the forest's darkness. "This place? It's a trap," she murmured, her voice swallowed by the silence of the woods. At that moment, Max was struck from behind, and he collapsed in pain. Harry turned to help him, but his reflection caught in the eyes of a hostile figure standing before him. Just one look, sheer cruelty without mercy. Harry's fear morphed into anger as he seized a branch and struck the attacker on the head. The man fell but quickly rose, letting out a shout that summoned the rest of his tribe. More locals emerged from the bushes, their faces illuminated by cruel smiles. Like predators, they surrounded Harry, Max, and Laura, ready to strike. It all happened so quickly, there was no time to think. In the frenzy, Harry felt someone grab his neck, pressing him to the ground. A blood-stained knife gleamed in the assailant's hand. Despite his own injuries, Max punched the man in the face, then pushed him off, leaving him in the shadows of fear. "Hurry!" Max yelled, dragging Harry along as they both darted into the thick forest. Every breath was labored, every sound deafening. They knew they were being hunted in this nightmare, and survival seemed like a distant hope. When they finally reached their camp, their hearts pounded madly, and their bodies burned with anxiety. Only then did they realize they were part of a deadly game, with the forest itself seeming to trap them within its embrace. Darkness settled over the island as Harry, Laura, and Max, exhausted from the previous night's events, tried to find shelter in their camp. But the calm was deceptive, and soon the forest filled with ominous sounds. Suddenly, more locals appeared from the shadows. Aggressive, dressed in primitive clothes, wielding spears and bows. Harry, a millionaire, could no longer afford to stay on the sidelines. He grabbed a spear, ready to defend himself and his friends. Laura and Max, inspired by his resolve, joined the fight. But the odds were against them. The locals attacked, their cries echoing through the forest, turning the night into a living nightmare. Harry fought fiercely to protect his life, but just as it seemed they might escape, one of the attackers crept up behind him. Harry had no time to react before a spear pierced his side. He cried out, but amidst the chaos and pain, he saw Max struggling against the others, desperately trying to protect Laura. "Run!" Harry shouted, and then he collapsed to the ground. The locals, like predators, encircled him, celebrating their victory over the outsider. His last moments were filled with terror as they mocked him, his cries muffled by the forest silence. Harry had become another casualty of a tribe that showed no mercy to intruders on their land. Laura, watching Harry's horrific end, felt her heart tear with fear and rage. She knew she and Max needed to escape immediately. Max, consumed by panic, tried to reassure her, but paranoia had gripped him too. "We have to go!" he shouted, though Laura's mind struggled to process it, leaving her feeling helpless. Laura and Max sprinted toward the forest, where branches and leaves twisted into an impassable chaos. Each step was filled with panic, their ears ringing with the blood-curdling cries of the tribesmen closing in. The locals, shadows in the night, chanted and howled, driving Laura and Max to run faster. Laura pushed through thorny branches, ignoring the scratches on her arms from the rough tree bark. Her heart raced in time with their steps, and it felt like the world around her was pulsing, growing increasingly hostile. Suddenly, a deep pit, camouflaged with leaves, appeared on their path, but Max managed to pull her back just in time, saving her from falling into the trap. They both leaned over the edge, their hearts pounding as they watched branches and debris drift into the void below. Regaining their balance, they pressed forward. But the further they went, the greater the danger grew. Laura felt a cold sweat on her back, realizing that every step could be her last. Laura glanced back. The tribe was closing in, their faces twisted in fury, spears in hand. Just then, one of them shot an arrow that whistled through the air, pierced the leaves above Max's head, and landed in the ground beside him. "Come on!" Max shouted, and they dashed forward, their minds fused with the instinct to survive. But just as they ran a few more meters, Laura stumbled into a trap. The ground beneath her suddenly crumbled, and she fell into a pit covered with debris and branches. She managed to grab Max's hand but took a hard fall, her body slamming into the ground. The world blurred before her eyes, and a chilling thought flashed in her mind that the tribe might catch up to them. "Laura!" Max called, pulling her up. "We have to get out of here." Laura scrambled out of the pit, feeling the ground shake as footsteps approached. She stretched, pushing her body to its limits, and finally managed to climb out. "Hurry!" Max whispered, fear gripping him. They sprinted forward, determined not to stop, even as they heard the cries in the forest that filled the air with dread. Finally, they emerged from the forest, standing on the edge of a cliff with only a steep drop leading into the ocean below. The locals had caught up to them, their bows drawn and ready to shoot. Laura's heart raced with terror as she saw them surrounding them on all sides. Max, covered in sweat and dirt, decided this was their last chance to escape. Desperately, he grabbed Laura's hand as the crowd began to close in. "Jump into the water!" he yelled, diving toward the ocean, hoping the water would hide them from this brutal fate. With no other option, Laura leaped off the cliff, seeking refuge from the ruthless tribe. In that moment, one of the pursuers, noticing their desperate jump, aimed quickly and threw a spear. It sliced through the air with a whistle and struck Max, piercing his body. Max gritted his teeth in pain, momentarily frozen midair, before plunging into the water, each drop of blood spreading rapidly in the dark depths. His arms floated limply in the water as he felt the cold seep into his wound, intensifying the pain, and his consciousness began to fade. Max struggled to stay afloat, but his body succumbed to the darkness and the cold. Blood spread in clouds around him, and the last thing he felt was the water swallowing him completely, taking his life into the silent abyss. Laura, bruised and battered from the exhausting leap off the cliff, staggered along the shore. Her body was drained, but her mind was desperately searching for a way to survive. Every step on the damp sand sent waves of pain through her, and despite the ominous sunrise, she felt no hope. She was utterly alone, the blood on the water a grim reminder of Max, whom she'd lost. Suddenly, sounds emerged from the jungle, and Laura froze, watching members of the tribe advancing silently, their vacant eyes fixed on her. She was nothing more than prey to them. Laura tried to run, but her strength was gone. After a few moments of struggle, they knocked her down and bound her hands. The tribesmen silently and calmly lifted her up. They dragged Laura through the forest until she saw a fence of sharpened spears. But even more horrifying was the sight of human heads atop them. Laura froze when she recognized the familiar face of Billy, and next to him was Emma's head with empty, staring eyes. A chill of terror overtook her as if she were already part of this dreadful collection. She was brought before the chief, a tall man adorned with bones who silently examined her, then spoke a few words in his language that sounded like a sentence. Laura was dragged to a tent where silent women tore off her clothes, painted strange symbols on her skin with a red liquid, and dressed her in a rough animal skin dress that barely covered her. Around her, a ghastly ritual began. To the beat of drums, the tribe encircled her, chanting and screaming, their eyes burning with wild madness. Their shadows twisted around her as if they were spirits of darkness craving her sacrifice. And remember, sometimes curiosity can take you further than you're prepared to go. Like, subscribe to the channel, and let me know in the comments what you think about this story. Would you dare to take such a risk?